Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to the Open Mic, the show where every episode I welcome writers, editors, agents, sometimes other folks from the publishing game to learn a little bit about them and the work they do, and hopefully give you some insights that'll help you with your own writing career. The show is available by the same name, the Open Mic, Writers in Their Own Words, via all of the major podcast platforms as well as on YouTube. So you can subscribe to either or to both, so you never miss a thing. I, of course, am your host, Rich Eisen, and my guest today really is one of the true legends of the LA writing scene, and he's going to blush a little bit when I say that because I know that maybe he's probably not all that comfortable with that, but it is really true. Those of us that are writers, we really look at Gary as one of those folks that everyone looks to for, the success he's had over a long career and his ability to just keep producing great work year upon year upon year. And so he's written scores of crime fiction novels. He's written a dozen graphic novels. Uh, Gosh, I've lost count of how many short stories. He's edited or co-edited a whole bunch of other anthologies. And now he's got a new novel out, which I'm going to hold up for y'all here if you're watching on YouTube. It is called The Hall, which, as you're hearing this, it probably came out about 2 weeks ago in June. I'm reading it right now. Of course, it's fantastic because everything Gary writes is fantastic. So he's here with me today to talk about the new book as well as some of his other work and all things writing and beyond. And so, once again, for the first time actually in 2 years, I didn't realize that till I started doing a little research for this. Gary Phillips, welcome back to the Open Mic. How are you doing today?
Rich, thanks for having me back. And as we were saying, for as you start to get up there and the knees are creaking and whatever, and it's all good. As I guess as long as it's all above ground. So there's
Yeah,
that. Yeah, yeah.
we're on the right side of the dirt still, so that really matters.
Lord have mercy.
Well, I mentioned the new book, and I'm going to hold it up one more time for the folks watching on YouTube, The Hall by Gary Phillips. It is a heist novel, which we'll talk a little bit about the heist novel. But yeah, give us the 411.
The book, and actually, I should mention the drop date got delayed some, but it'll drop July 14th.
Oh,
So
perfect. Actually,
yeah.
so we're actually a little ahead of the curve. That's not bad.
Oh, great. The book, the center character is a man named O'Connor, and O'Connor has made a couple other appearances before. There was a novel called The Warlord of Willow Ridge in 2012. It was a paperback original, and then he showed up again in a linked anthology called Culprits, which actually got optioned and made as a miniseries, but has, except for the structure, almost has nothing to do with what the anthology was about. Anyway, so in this outing, O'Connor's a man of a certain age. He's rummaging somewhere in his 40s. He's got a fairly comfortable life out in. It's not quite the. It's in Riverside. He lives in Hemet. He lives in a subdivision, and Hemet. I don't know, for people who were from the Southern California area know that Hemet is, relatively speaking, kind of a working class area. But the subdivision itself is one of those sort of middle class enclaves, in the midst of this other area. And he has a woman he lives with, and she knows not every detail, but she knows enough about his life that he's not born and bred to the manor, I guess is the way to say it. And she knows about his nefarious undertakings. Anyway, we come upon him doing a very middle-aged, middle-class thing. He's playing pickleball, couples pickleball. And but he gets the call that he's been waiting for, and this draws him back in. And the plot is put in motion when he takes up the challenge to essentially rip off a tech bro. This particular tech bro, an amalgam of several tech bros, happens to own a NBA team in Inglewood, California. He's built a new arena for them, and but beneath the arena is his swank. He has several, but one of his swank survival bunkers, and they're pretty certain because they're working on inside information. They're pretty certain that this individual has secreted away in case the zombie apocalypse or whatever, or the collapse of society, whichever comes first. some money and some gold, some cash and some gold, and by God, they're at least going to liberate them of some of that.
I love that. I mean, tech bros are like the new kind of almost generic evildoer in our society, right? And I think that's great. Anything that takes down the tech bros is
or
not
at least the
bad.
robber barons of our time, right? You know,
Absolutely. They're
yeah,
they're the old railroad guys for sure.
exactly.
You
Railroad and
know,
steel, yeah.
you've written so many books, as I noted in the intro. Do you still get the same thrill on release day that you did maybe in that first one or two?
Man, Rich, I think to the only parallel I can draw to O'Connor because I certainly don't have his nerves or his acumen for the job, but the one thing that I can certainly say as a parallel is that the thrill is never gone, man. One or 100 or 50 or however many I get to do before I'm out of here, man, I still get the same. Still get the same rush, man. When you open that box and them bad boys are sitting there, and it's a physical reality, and all the other things that you're thinking about, which will come back anyway. Can I sell enough copies? Can I get my name and the book cover above, heard above, and seen above the herd of all the other book covers and names of writers, trying to get their stuff out there. But man, when you open that box and you see it, I mean, it's just great. It's like bam. I mean, here it is, and yeah, all you got to do all the other stuff with it, but just the idea that you've made it this far and it became a reality.
Well, and along those lines, about, you know, how far the road is from concept to publication. And it really doesn't matter if it's your first one, though that always seems to be the longest one in so many ways because you're trying to get established and, get someone to take a chance at you,
Right.
with you and all that. But, you know, they're all tough. And
That's
so
right.
I'm curious, what keeps you motivated? What is the thing that drives you in this process? Especially when you've been doing it this long. I mean, even Don Winslow was retired, I mean, at some point, what is the thing that keeps Gary Phillips at the keyboard producing these stories?
I'll give you a great uh, and it's like maybe a couple of hours old. This example, I was sitting at my desk. This is not my usual desk. This is our kind of our I say our back office. This is really my wife's office, but it's in our kind of converted garage. She's away, so I get to be out here. But basically, my up in my office, which is in our bedroom, but I was leafing through some papers on my somewhat orderly desk and side desk, and but big stacks of various papers. And as I'm leafing through looking for one thing, I come upon this other notation that I had printed out and written some on, and it's a longer story, but basically the point being that notation then reminded me, oh yes, this is why I made a note of this because I want to do this, with this idea, but I want to use it with this other character of mine that I've been toying with, and so I think it's maybe it is the next new shiny thing, but I like to think that those next new shiny things keep me going, keeps the neurons firing, and keeps me going as both a practitioner of this form, but of course as a reader and consumer of it as well. And so I think if the ideas are fresh to me, or at least pique my interest, hopefully that means that I can flesh that idea out, and I can deliver something that will pique the interest of the reader.
You know, I don't really ask anymore about writer's block because I think most writers who are as consistent as you are don't really suffer from writer's block. But I am always curious about creativity
Hmm.
because creativity, really, what a writer's block is the you don't feel creative enough, you can't process stuff. And I'm curious, how you manage to keep your creative juices going. And you just noted one thing, where the bright new shiny object, and that's motivating. But even then, you still have to be able to craft a story and all of that. And so how do you keep yourself motivated in that creative way,
Yeah,
whether it's
yeah.
writing one genre or another genre? Is it that balance of being able, hey, I can write multiple things. I don't have to write just the one thing. What is it that keeps your creative aspects of your writing going?
Rich, I would say I'm doing the finishing touches on a short story now, and I think what it is, and it's a variation on as a writer, you might become the one trick pony, right? That you can kind of write a kind of book, and you could probably write that kind of book or variations of it for a while, right? And but then you realize that, well, I'm running out of gas, and what should I do here? And I think though the idea is that if as long as you can keep little challenges or even big challenges, little challenges for yourself as you're writing, whether it's a short story, a comic book script, screenplay, book, what have you, uh, if you can keep, if you can be in the skin of the character, and then really, if you can put that character through their paces, and I think one of the ways, at least for me, because I'm a genre writer, is to him that character up. I started with telling you I'm writing the short story, and in the short story, I knew I wanted this one scene with the character, and that there was no easy way out of the scene. And I thought, well, I could not do that scene, or I'll just stick with that scene for a minute. I'll stick with it in my head, and I'll think about, well, how possibly can I get this particular character out of this predicament? How can I? And sometimes this might be a physical predicament, or it could be a psychological predicament, right? And I think the more you can kind of push on yourself, which is to say, push on your character to back them up, to put them up against it. However we might react, I suppose you bring some of that to it, but then you also then have to then, as I said, kind of put on that other skin of that character. And what do they do? How do they react? And maybe listen, in some cases maybe they don't get out of it,
Right.
or maybe I put myself in such a corner that I can't get out of it. But I at least want to, I guess, put myself through the paces to see if I can pull it off, but pull it off hopefully in an organic way, so that it does resonate with the reader, and it's not so much, the side door opened and the cavalry came in.
How often, if ever, have you worked on something, got to a point where you said, okay, this isn't going to work, or
Mm,
it's not the thing I
mm,
wanted for this
mm.
particular story I wanted to tell. Maybe I've kind of gone off track a little bit. So you take it and you set that part of it aside, and then maybe have come back later and taken that maybe the even big chunks of dialogue or story or something and been able to apply it to something else where it does work. Is that something that you do in your work at all?
Yes and no. So that actually, this is good. It's a good example of what you're talking about, which is to say, in that first uh, iteration of O'Connor, Warlord of Willow Ridge, man, I was like 40,000 words into the book. And somehow or another, I'm working on a particular passage, and all of a sudden it occurred to me what the book was about. Even though I work from an outline, right? I have some sense of what are the mechanics of the plot, and how things are going to happen, and what are kind of the highs and lows of the characters. And it only then could go back, and as you pointed out, I either jettisoned some dialogue or I corrected some dialogue, so that when we got to that 40,000 words in, oh, this makes sense now, what happens next, as opposed to I'm going to kind of shoehorn these, try to put these things together, and they don't really work together. So the short answer is to that is that I edit and do rewrites or small rewrites along the way. Like on a book, I'll stop every once in a while and I'll read what I've got, adjust, change things, move stuff around, so that by the time I get to the end, I've already done, for my purposes. Now, of course, it's still going to go through some iterations. I have a wonderful editor at Soho, but I've at least arrived at where I think is a good draft of the material. Short stories, of course, and this is a good point. I mean, I have one now sitting in the drawer because I went off on a tangent on the story, and I realized, oh, this is not really where I want to go. But I'm not. I'm not forcing that story. That's the story that's not due for a while. So I'm going to let that simmer for a while, but knowing sort of to the point, I'm going to jettison certain things that I did just because I know that it's not working. So for short stories, you can, you just sort of feel free to sort of rewrite and jettison things. For novels, I jettison and rewrite, but as I go along, as I try to tweak things and shape things so that eventually, hopefully, it comes together in a more organic way. Because like in a book, let's face it, I've got use the TV parlance. I've got an A plot, I got a B plot, and I probably got a C plot. Sometimes those things are running, train like parallel down the tracks. Sometimes they cross, and sometimes they merge. And so that juggling act for me keeps me aware, and it keeps me vibrating with the material, so that I have some sense of how these things are merging or not merging.
Right. You mentioned both short stories and books here, and I've been asking this a lot of folks lately because I'm really interested in this. Because I read something in a craft book a while back where the author of the book said no writer should ever start out trying to write a novel because it's too complex, it's too big of a task for an inexperienced writer. And his feeling is a writer should start with short stories and
Mm.
then build to
Mm.
writing novels. Now, you've obviously been great and have tons of experience at both. What do you think of that advice? Is that something you agree with, or do you think it's a much more individual thing than that?
Uh, I, yeah, I think it's a much more individual thing than that. Having been somebody who whose first novel will never see the light of day, although I've cannibalized from it since then. Um, though, so the argument could be you could still tackle that first novel, and in some cases, as we know, people hit it on that first book, right? Those books become whatever they get known, and they get this and that, whatever. I think though it can be still a great learning experience, and it can be very frustrating because you might never sell that novel, or maybe you'll self-publish that novel. I still think you learn a lot, even if quote unquote the book is not a success or doesn't see the light of day. I still think you learn things from it. And for me, my track was somewhat concurrent. That is to say, I actually had what would be my second novel, but my first published novel, Violent Spring. And at the same time, I was writing a short story with that character, that PI character. And so actually, the short story appeared first because I'd been asked to contribute to an anthology, Spook Spies and Private Eyes, and then the novel came. But so both those tracks were kind of running, or both those trains on the tracks were kind of running at the same time. But I would say, but really, that first novel, the first published novel, again, is the second novel, the second attempt at a novel, and so I learned a lot between one and two. I suppose, I suppose the answer is your temperament, and where are you in the state of things, and do you mind a possible rejection for that first novel, but understanding that you got to still learn from what you did in that first novel. What were the highs? What were the lows?
Yeah.
And what can I bring from that to the next time I want to tackle a novel?
How long do you feel it it took you into your career to feel like you had really found your
Huh.
voice, your very specific Gary Phillips
Hmm.
voice? Was that a long process? I mean, or maybe you feel like you're still looking for it.
Yeah.
I don't know. But, do you have a sense of when, you really felt like going in, you were not searching anymore for that
Right.
voice that was yours?
Right. Yeah. Again, I think that's a great question, Rich. I think, yeah, I think to some extent I'm still kind of looking forward, and or maybe I'm adjusting it as I go. Um, and I think, by the way, and I think that kind of gets us to that back to that other question, which is to say, um, not wanting to be the one trick pony. So not wanting, there are certain passages I write. Sometimes I think, well, I've said it like that 100 times. Can I, surely I could vary this. I could do something different here at this particular moment to give us a different cadence, a different beat. So I think you're always, to that extent, you're always aware that you're trying to manipulate the words. You're trying to manipulate the pacing in a different way than you've done it before, at least to a certain extent. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I think for me, the thing about the voice, yeah, I think there's a certain kind of sensibility I recognize in my passages. Just as though, by the way, I'll recognize sometimes, and I've had this occur to me, not recently, but sometime somewhere in the past, where something will be read back to me, but it got heavily edited, and I knew it, I wrote it, but I also knew that I didn't write it. So I guess to that extent, I'm aware of what my writing sounds like uh, when I hear it, whether
Hmm.
I hear it myself saying the words out loud or I hear it an audiobook version or what have you, or when it gets altered. So to that extent, I suppose I have some innate notion of what quote unquote what my voice is, in regarding my work. But I suppose I try not to be uh, what's the word? Complacent. I try
Yeah.
to be too complacent about it, right? I try to be, well, again, what can I do a little different here? What can I do? What can I adjust here to make this passage sing in a different way rather than the same note? What's the new note I can try to find?
You know, crime fiction and graphic novels were once genres, I think we could all agree, that were not overly welcoming to women or to writers of color. How do you see those genres now, and particularly crime fiction? Do you feel that the industry has advanced and become more open to
Hmm.
writers who are not just only straight white males?
Hmm. Hmm. No, I think so. I mean, I suppose there's arguments to be made up and down up and down the block about that. But I certainly think if you look at what's available now on the shelves, you look at I belong to a couple of different groups, Crime Writers of Color and Short Mystery Fiction Society, etc., along with the established or along with the more traditional MWA Sisters in Crime. And so, if you look at the material that's being put out there, I think there's a wide variety of stuff that's available now. Getting the stuff through the pipeline, and however that is, right? And whether that's the big success of Sean Cosby, the well-deserved success of Sean Cosby, or lesser lights. So that's one thing. And now getting the audience to find out about your work, or the audience that would respond to your work, even this make them even more specific because the audience is a shotgun thing, but really trying to find the readers that would hone in on your work and would sink in with it. That sometimes that still is the rub, right? That's the big rub. And of course, now that we have, I guess we still have the big five or the big four. I can never quite keep up,
Yeah, me either.
right? But we have these conglomerates, and the conglomerates own this imprint, that imprint, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of stuff gets put out there. I mean, listen, Rich, I'm actually stunned at the output. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff I want to get to, and and like you, I'm sure that stat keeps growing in terms of stuff I just want to read
Yeah.
because I want to read it, right? Let alone, oh man, I got this thing on deadline. I got to go do this other thing right now. So that I don't think the question is so much, at least in today's market. I'll say, I guess I'll say it, talk out of both sides of my mouth. So in today's market, I don't think the question is so much getting the work produced, or that is to say, getting it in a form, book, audio, etc. That it's available, it's accessible. The question, the burning question for all us midlist writers, etc., is how do I now get this to an audience or part of that audience that will respond to this material?
Hmm. Tell me about the roles, again, if at all, each of the following two things
Hmm.
plays in your writing. And the first one is redemption, and the second is empathy.
Hmm.
Tell
Hmm.
me about those two things in your writing.
Well, that's good because that circles us back to the hall, and O'Connor's a professional thief. Uh, uh, he is, and I say this freely because I acknowledge it in the book. I owe a debt, like several crime fiction writers have said also publicly, to the late great Donald Westlake, writing as Richard Stark and as Parker, Sirius Parker, about this amoral thief in an amoral world. And and when I constructed O'Connor, certainly I drew on some of that, and to the extent that this gets to the redemption question, to the extent that he's never going to be like, is it Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment who comes to God at the end of it, right?
Mhm.
That's not O'Connor's fate. O'Connor is never going to be upset or regretful that he stole he had big time heists that he pulled off. He's going to regret that one last heist he wasn't able to pull.
Right, right.
uh, but it, so he's not a character seeking redemption. Uh, Harry Harry Ingram in the Harry books is seeking redemption.
Hmm.
Harry Ingram is my crime photographer character set in the. I think that's when we were first on. I was first on. I think we talked about One Shot Harry, and
Yeah.
and Harry, yeah, Harry, it's set in the '60s in L.A. Harry's a Korean War vet. There was a terrible accident that happened in Korea where he kills a kid in this village they're in as a GI, and it's going to haunt him to the day he dies, and it should. Uh, and 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 to the extent that that propels him forward in a time of change in Los Angeles, a time of change in America. The civil rights movement is ongoing, or reaching its flowering, etc. And these things are around Harry, and Harry is affected by these events as they play out nationally, but also as they play out locally. His girlfriend, who's we would now term a red diaper baby, she's mixed race, but they're very close, and her worldview has affected him as well. So for Harry, he couldn't articulate this, just as he cannot articulate his what we call now PTSD, but for him was shell shock, right? Combat fatigue. Just as he cannot articulate that, but he knows there's something, right? He knows he is in search of something. And I suppose, and so again, to contrast him with O'Connor, not that O'Connor, by the way, is a blank slate. I mean, I purposely in the hall go back in time with him. There are flashbacks to him in as a kid, 13 or 14, in '98 in South Central, and of course there's the, as they say, the inciting incident that brings our present and future players together, happens in that first chapter, so that we also see the path that O'Connor is taking even then as a kid, as a young
Hmm.
man, and for right or for wrong, right? And you could argue, well, if he had parental input or whatever, okay, well he didn't, but he's not bemoaning that. He has gone forward from that. He is built on that. Now, you could argue, I suppose, if you were to put him on the couch, on the analyst's couch, you would say, well, you clearly locked off these portions of your life, and you should let them in, because that's partly the road to redemption. But I don't think so. So specifically to contrast them, for Harry Ingram, yes. For O'Connor, not so much, right? Not so much. The second part was
Empathy.
empathy. That's right. Well, I think both characters, certainly Harry more than O'Connor,
Yeah, I definitely see it in Harry.
right, have empathetic urges. Now, O'Connor, of course, has tamped a lot of that down, but we do see flashes of it, and we do see, even so, that to contrast him, let's say, with Parker, I was interested to know, for O'Connor, uh, there are people we meet in that first chapter who show up later in various ways. And we also start to see, though, there's this other side, this other dimension to O'Connor that he doesn't let many people see, but nonetheless exists. So that, yeah, I think to write a completely unempathetic character, or a character who's not capable of sort of that kind of notions, I guess is a certain psychological state. And I've written those kind of characters, I suppose, mostly in short stories. But I think for me to stay with a character for a while, because I'm going to come back to O'Connor, I mean, in some other version or some other book, or hopefully maybe a graphic novel down the line, it is. I do want to say at least that he has some notions of these other civilian thoughts and feelings that he is willing to put aside, because that's just the nature of the work that he does and the business that he is in, as it were, right? Which is kind of ruthless and cutthroat, and therefore I exist when I go to work. When I'm not playing pickleball, when I go to work, I put on I'm putting on a different shirt. I'm putting on some different clothes, because this work requires me to do this. Now, you could make the argument for, well, therefore you should probably not be doing that. And I think even for O'Connor, because he understands that at a certain point, time is never on none of our sides. So at some point he can't do this anymore. But I think for him, he wants to run out. He wants to run out the clock. I think for O'Connor, they die with their boots on, all that kind of stuff. I think for him, Harry would be different. I think Harry would like to be on that rocking porch with Anita, his old lady, and watching the sun go down at some point. But I don't think, I don't think O'Connor ever sees that happening. I mean, I think he really wants to run out the string. He's just gonna. That's it. This is the life I've chosen, and I'm not asking
O'Connor
you. Yeah, yeah.
O'Connor reminds me, and I haven't read the whole book,
Okay,
so
no
this is
worries.
not the most informed opinion, but he reminds me a little bit, in that, and especially in the way you just described him, a little bit of John Wayne's character in The Searchers, where he's very driven. He's got these things that are like terrible in his life that he's trying to deal with. In The Searchers, of course, John Wayne's looking for his niece, who's been captured by, I think, the Comanche.
Mm.
And in the end, he can't just walk back in and be with the family.
No,
He's not built that way.
that's right.
He can't.
And yeah,
And that's a little bit of what I've been getting from O'Connor as I'm reading this, is he is a man apart from what, again, a Harry Ingram. It's been my experience with a lot of your writings, Harry Ingram. They just felt very different to me
yeah,
in that regard.
yeah. Well, hopefully they do, because you're getting us back to, we want our characters to be these characters, and we want to be in their skin. And you're right. And while I would suggest that O'Connor shares none of the political
Right.
points of view of John Wayne,
Right.
uh, it is that great scene at the end of The Searchers where John Wayne hands the baby to his sister, whoever he has, but he hands the baby to this woman, and the woman goes, in the way that the shot, John Wayne is out on the porch, and so, but the camera's looking at him through the house, but it's dark in
Yeah.
the house. But you can see John Wayne, and then the door closes. We're inside the house,
Yeah.
right? The door closed with John Wayne out on the porch. To your point, you've done your job, right? You brought back the sister. You've done this thing, but what happens next is not for you.
Yeah.
This is not your world. You've brought too much violence. You've brought too much whatever. You've played your role, but your role is done now. Your role is done now. Now, O'Connor, at least O'Connor thinks he can have it both ways. Well, I think deep down he knows he can't.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that when all's said and done, and you'll see, hopefully, if you get to the end of the book, when all's said and done, can he go back to the world of pickleball and raking up the yard with the old lady and stuff? Well, maybe, but because which begs the question, well, which one is the facade?
Yeah.
Right? Which one and I think really the real O'Connor is the guy who's sitting there with that big heavy a heavy duty drill with the diamond tip going right through that right precise point of the safe to open the safe without tripping all these locks that would then therefore keep them out, and they'd have to blow up the safe, but then they'd blow up the contents. But to get that safe door open, or whatever that lock is, whatever that obstacle is, and again, he's got enough money now. He lives a comfortable life. He's not hurting for double. He doesn't have to do the score for the money. That's not why he does the score.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the things that I think good crime fiction and thriller writers do is the protagonist, flawed and otherwise, they don't get to escape the repercussions of the violent world that they live in, right? Because
Right.
that's a fairy tale.
That's right.
Once you have been touched by violence and once you have been the purveyor of violence,
There
you
you
are
go.
not the same human being.
That's right.
And I think the best crime fiction writers out there, you're not just this automatron that goes and you save the girl or you do the perfect crime or whatever, and then you walk away and yeah, now you're sitting on the beach with your margarita and it's
Right.
no, there's no, um, there's no misery in your wake in that
Yeah.
world. But in the real world, there is, and that's the
That's right.
thing I think the great writers do is that they show to even to whatever extent
Yes.
that no one gets to walk away from it scot-free. Even if they get the thing they're after, there's always a price to be paid.
That's right.
And
That's
so
right.
that's one of the things I really admire about writers that can do that because to me that makes it really touches home a little bit more, right?
Yes. No, that's right. I mean, even it's interesting that we're on the subject. I hadn't, man. I don't think I'd seen Heat. Was one of those classic modern heist films, right? With De Niro and Pacino as the cop or the thief and the cop. And but there's a and I don't think I'd seen Heat, maybe not since it came out, because I certainly recall seeing it at the movie house, at the big house. But it turns out that damn thing is 31 years old. So there you go. But anyway, so I'm watching it the other night for the first time in at least 20 years. I'm watching it for the first time in 20 years. And there's a line where De Niro tells this woman now that he's met, and he's kind of he's at a stage in his life, and that this is going to be the last score, et cetera, et cetera. And it talks about to your point about being on the beach with the Mai Tai and all that, about going away to Fiji. As soon as and he delivers a line like he's supposed to, right? That you believe that he believes this, but we also believe, no, you're not. No,
Right.
you're not. You have done these terrible things. You're a thief. You've killed people in cold blood. You're not going away to Fiji, man. That ain't happening. You
Right.
think you're going away to Fiji, but you're not. You're
No,
not.
that is not, no,
Yeah, that's not
not
in the
feasible.
cards.
So switch gears just a little bit here. I know you came up at least a little bit in Los Angeles
Yeah,
during the Watts riots. I know you were a kid.
yeah,
That's still part of your history.
that's right. As is 92.
Yes,
Right.
yes was
Oh man.
92 and other things too. Because because in this day and age, we still have the kind of police brutality that sparked the Watts riots and
Right.
sparked the Rodney King riots.
Yes.
And now we also have ICE and even active duty Marines being sent into
Right.
American cities, really, let's be very honest, for the purpose of terrorizing their own citizens.
That's right.
Is there really any way, when you sit down to write, to separate the reality of the world we live in, and especially you living in a city like LA, which always seems to be the center of so much of this, from your work? Do you ever feel like you want to separate the reality of of the world from your work? But I mean, really, even if you wanted to, could
All right.
you?
Yes, yes, to some extent, I have to, Rich, because understanding that the Hall is a different kind of book than a Harry Ingram book. Yeah, even understanding that the Hall, as you just said, and I agree with you, even understanding that here you have Harry's world of Los Angeles in the 1960s, and here you have O'Connor's world. I mean, he's not really he more or less operates in Los Angeles. I mean, really, that's where he operates, right? And O'Connor's world of Los Angeles in 2026, and yet here are these parallels and similarities. And as you said, now you have not only, I mean, arguably in the past you had a somewhat at least indifferent federal government. Now you have a federal government that's like, oh no, we're not indifferent. No, we're here to drop the hammer on you too.
Right. Right.
All right. So I'm, it's like, oh, really? And I think, uh, one of the characters in the book, Mavis Joyner, is a software engineer, and she, of course, also provides the insider information and the impetus to do this thing. So really, through Mavis, we hear some of that, right? We don't hear it from O'Connor because honestly, I just don't think that's not his character. O'Connor's black,
Right.
and he's not that he is aware of the world he lives in. He understands that, but that's just not the stuff that's on his mind, right? He knows this, but again, it's just one more contingency that I have to plan for, I have to allow for, and one more obstacle that I might have to get out of my way. But other than that, I'm not looking to change the status quo so much. Mavis is looking to change the status quo, and we get that from her. And so to your point, you're right. You can't. At least for me, I cannot write these things in a total vacuum because otherwise it just doesn't. It's tone deaf, man. It don't sound right. I can't listen. I can't play a note, but my grandson's learning the trumpet. My wife knows how to play guitar, so I can at least borrow that music analogy to say that I know that a musician's got to be able to hear that thing to play it and whatever. And I do know that I can't. Some of that has to filter in. It just has to because it is the world. It is reality. Now I don't have O'Connor sitting there, camped out in front of MS Now, having a beer, shaking his head and thinking about the fate of the world and Gaza and my God and Ebola, et cetera, because nobody's gonna read. What a thief is this guy, man? Right, no social worker. When's he gonna steal something? So you got to have that. But you're right. You also can't. It can't be so devoid of a reality that you have to give some semblance of some verisimilitude that his world is our world. It's a different world, but he exists in the realm that we exist in.
Well, because that world right now it's the government. They don't act the way they did even 4 years ago.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
A lot of things have changed, and you can't have a character moving through the world under the old rules if it's set in right now. If it's set, you got something set in 1930, they got to move through the 1930s rules.
That's right.
You said in the 60s, it's the 1960s rules.
That's
if you have them now, you can't be having them walking through Barack Obama's America because that ain't here anymore.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
What for you, again, and I ask this of you because you're a veteran, you've been at this a long time, and we all know this can be such a disheartening business. You can get, the rejection is constant, and sometimes it's brutal. This business doesn't have time for your feelings and all that stuff. What's the toughest part of being a writer for you in this day and age? And conversely, what is the best part of it?
Wow. Well, I think, as you said, Rich, that listen, the toughest part is still being rejected. The toughest part is still being like, an idea you want to do, and maybe I'm at the stage now where I try to just sell these things on a premise and an outline, and can't get it going. I can't, or maybe I got to write the whole book, and hopefully I can try to sell that book, but maybe that won't do it either. This gets us back to various ideas I have in my head that I want to do, and the time to do them. But so I think, well, again, I guess, but also keeps you. So then that also answers the second part of that question, or the second question of that, which is to say, so the best thing about that is that it at least keeps me from being complacent, and at least I think to the extent that it keeps me on my toes, and to the other point, which is to say, if if I can't find satisfaction in the world of novels for a while, maybe I can find satisfaction in the world of comics. Maybe I can find satisfaction in this arena of short stories. And if that don't work, well, what the hell? I'll just sit there and write that, the great American script, and nobody will buy it, but I'm going to still write it because the writing is still the writing, man. I mean, it's the gas, man. It's the juice, because if I can't do it, I mean, that's going to be one thing. But as long as I can still do it, and get those pages together, I just think there is satisfaction in that. There is something to say that why to keep going and why to keep pushing that rock.
Maybe a last serious question here, and it's not that serious, but you like most writers, you've done a million other things in your life because you don't start out making a living at this thing, right? You got to
Right.
kind of figure out how to keep the bills paid and all
That
that.
is true.
You've done so many things. You've been a community activist, you've been a labor organizer. Um, but tell me more about delivering dog cages.
Oh, that was just that wasn't really long and sustained. It was I in fact it was as work I worked for several years as a printer, and one of the outfits I did printing for, we printed wasn't offset printing. It's called it prints on presses where you are printing self-adhesive label, but we would do labels for like Dawn soap or things like that. But they all come off in a big web, and it's all sort of convoluted. But anyway, but the side hustle of the guy who owned the business was dog cages. So when times when the presses weren't running consistently, when the sales force wasn't bringing in the jobs, we delivered dog cages.
Well, see, now there is a lesson for y'all out there. If you're struggling, look, man, if you're feeding the beast, the real beast, you're riding, there's no job that is below you, man. There's no
That's right.
that go do it.
Don't do it. That's
Go
right.
do it. And
It was
again,
a side hustle in the days before they ever used that term. That's right. That's right.
yes,
Yes.
yes. And
Yes.
before it could be delivering food to people who, too lazy to go to get their own damn food at the store or make something in the kitchen. Come on now.
Ah, ah, ah.
God bless them, though, right?
God bless them. That's right. That's
All right.
right.
Well, I like to end on a question that is meant to be kind of fun, and I hope you feel that way. I'm the omnipotent being. I can put you together with one of the three following people. There's always a little theme. You'll probably pick it out pretty fast. Most people do. Who would you choose and why? I can put you in the same room for a sit down, whatever, a couple drinks, dinner, whatever you want to do with these one of these three people. Who would you choose? The options I'm going to give you are William Mulholland,
Mm.
Raymond Chandler,
Mm-hmm.
or Charlotta Spears Bass.
Ha 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 ha! You would ask. Those are great choices. Of course, the obvious choice would be Chandler, right? But I think he was something of a reserved cat, from what I understand, having now seen a couple of documentaries about him, and I'm actually in my head is Mitchum talking about Chandler. Hmm. And then, oh my God, would it be Miss Bass? Would she? There's an attachment there. There certainly is a kindred spirit, right? There's a kindred spirit. So okay, because then he's not a kindred spirit, I guess I'd say Mulholland. That's right. I'd say Mulholland
I,
because why
I,
not,
I love
right?
your logic there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But and
It
and
was
if
convoluted, but I had to get there. I had to get there. So
and
let's
if
say
you're
let's say
trying to
Mulholland.
figure out the thread, it is obviously those are three towering figures in LA
Absolutely,
history.
absolutely. That's right.
Mulholland Drive is named after William Mulholland.
That's right.
We all know about Raymond Chandler, and Charlotta Spears Bass was so many things, but she was the longtime editor of the California
California.
Eagle,
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
one of the great
That's
black
right.
newspapers of the
But she
day,
she
which
was a
which
crusader for
for
for civil rights and
absolutely,
she was
absolutely.
a progressive. So you're right. I'm sure all my lefty friends will be disappointed, but you know what? But I can know about her. Mulholland, because let's get us back to the robber barons, right? It gets us back to
Yes.
those towering egos, and but driven, who shaped the city, right?
Yeah.
for what all different kinds of reasons, right? All different kinds of visions. But it would be very interesting to have cigars and drinks with this cat to hear what he really wanted, right? What was on his mind. And by the way, using chicanery and arm twists, all that stuff, but it's just fascinating, right? It would be a fascinating evening.
Yeah, I agree. And it's often better to have conversations with people that you don't know a lot about. I
That's
mean,
right.
that's when you're going to get something out of it. So
Exactly.
a great choice. Again, for all my good friends in LA, that's one of the reasons I chose those three. Of course, LA's are Gary's an icon in Los Angeles for his great career. Gary, I'm going to hold the book up one more time. If you're on YouTube, you're seeing the Hall. Gary
Bless you.
Phillips coming out July 14th. Got pushed back
Bless
a
you.
little bit, which I'm glad. That's probably about the time you're going to watch this video or listen to the pod. Gary, it is always such a pleasure to talk to you and to talk about writing and to talk about publishing. It's really a joy to be able to share a conversation with you and just to see that you just keep putting out one great thing after another. So power to you, man.
All right, Rich. Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure, man. I really dug this interlude that we had. It was great.
Great. Well, look, I'm going to say to you out there the same thing I always say. First of all, please, if you haven't hit subscribe, do that. Be so kind, maybe tell a friend about the show. This is a great way to learn something about publishing and writing and inspiration and creativity. And you don't have to go drop a bunch of money on a craft book. So it's a freebie, right? But no, I learn something every day from these people. I've been doing this now a long time, and I'm so privileged to be able to share a conversation with so many great folks in the writing world. So tell a friend. Hopefully, somebody else will also get something out of it. And the last thing I always leave you with, which is, tomorrow is not promised to any of us. So whatever you do, make today count. Until then, for my guest Gary Phillips, for myself, Rich Eisen, this has been the Open Mic.